Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. As we get started on our 2025-26 budget town hall, I'd like to point out that we are using a Mentimeter tool to help improve interactivity and engagement with you this evening. You can use the QR code on the screen to access Mentimeter, or you can join at menti.com, MENTI.com, and please use the code shown on the screen here. Okay, and I'll turn things over now to our president, Mohammed Lashmi, to get us started this evening.
Good afternoon or good evening all. Thank you very much for joining today's budget town hall. Consultation is a very important part of the budget planning process, and we are committed to working with the community to establish TMU's priorities for the next fiscal year. As you know, our Board of Governors requires the university to develop a responsible annual budget that sets the university up for ongoing financial sustainability. This fiscally responsible and transparent approach ensures that we are able to remain forward-looking and not to accumulate financial issues over time. Since 2017, TMU has undertaken periodic credit rating reviews. The university currently has an AA3 credit rating with a stable outlook, which indicates a high quality grade and that we are subject to a low credit risk. To ensure continued good standing, we must plan prudently and ensure that we are not leaving future groups of students and employees to deal with financial issues down the road. This year, we once again find ourselves in a constrained growth environment. The provincial government continues to restrict our domestic enrollment levels. In addition, we are entering our 6th year of a tuition fee framework that decreases fees by 10% below 2018-2019 levels and has kept them frozen since ever. This cut and freeze has had a real impact on our operating revenue. We continue to work with our fellow universities and sector partners like the Council of Ontario Universities to connect with government and illustrate the negative impact of these tuition policies on the fiscal health of our post-secondary institutions. In addition to this, the federal government's recent cap on international study permits introduces another financial challenge for universities. While we recognize the need for a sustainable approach to international education, the reduction in permits will have an impact on our enrollment and revenue. Despite these challenges, we remain committed to providing high-quality educational experience for all our students and will continue to be forward-thinking and support institutional priorities within a balanced budget framework. There are exciting developments underway for our institution. Our new School of Medicine in Brampton will be opening its doors later this year. Construction will soon begin on our new Student Wellness Center at the heart of our campus, and we continue to be recognized for an academic excellence on a global scale. These achievements underscore the fact that TMU continues to be a local community builder and, most importantly, a university committed to its mission to prepare the next generation of leaders working to drive positive change. With that, I will turn it over to our Provost and VP Academic, Roberta Iniciato Provenzano, to speak about our guiding principles in the budget process and future planning, and I look forward to your questions and comments at the end of the presentation. Over to you, Roberta.
Thank you very much, Mohammed, and thank you everyone for taking the time to participate in tonight's town hall. Your feedback and input are crucial steps in our budget planning. The operating budget is the financial plan for how the university will receive and spend funds in a fiscal year. It represents our allocation of resources, includes an estimate of revenues and expenditures, and allows for the prioritization of resources to be allocated in a way that achieves the goals and objectives of the university. The budget also provides accountability to our stakeholders. Next slide, please. When preparing the annual budget, we adhere to 5 guiding principles. So for us, it is important to prioritize students, protect TMU's core business of teaching, SRC, and service, be fair and transparent. It's important to remain forward-looking, and it's very important to conduct wide consultations with community, as we are doing this evening. These principles are paramount to how we plan for the future. Next slide, please. Looking into 25-26, our priorities are to align with TMU's strategic vision and related plans, provide a high-quality experience for undergraduate and graduate students inside and outside of the classroom, implement the university's new academic plan, launch the School of Medicine, and advance the strategic enrollment management framework to help drive TMU's academic and institutional success by enabling effective strategic and financial planning, program sustainability, and by improving access and support to both domestic and international students throughout their student life cycle. Next slide, please. There are 4 complementary plans that play a role in our budget planning: the academic plan, the strategic research plan, the international plan, and our campus master plan. The new academic plan, strategic research plan, and international plan for 2025 to 2030 were released this year after being developed through consultations and community input. Unifying these plans is TMU's strategic vision that goes from 2020 to 2030. This overarching framework serves as our roadmap, moving TMU toward the same vision and goals. As we plan the budget, we keep in mind the priorities articulated in the 25 to 2030 academic plan, which are to enhance the learning journey for greater student success, create positive impact through SRC excellence and local and global collaboration, to support our people and our community, to continue our commitment to truth and reconciliation, and of course, to ensure future readiness. Next slide, please. At this time, as Kimberly mentioned, we have an exercise on Mentimeter that we'd like you to participate in, and we'll be collecting your responses in real time. Of course, all responses are completely anonymous. To interact with this slide, please join Mentimeter. I see some of you already have. As you can see already on the screen, the things you input will show up as a word cloud. So it'll change and it'll grow as more responses are received. And if multiple people put in the same word, that word will get bigger, as you can see with student well-being. So we'll just give everybody a moment to participate. You can see on the screen how many people are participating. And we'll have a look at what shows up. Okay, so we're seeing a lot of student-related words, students first, student well-being, also staff well-being, student support, experiential learning, of course, mental health, library investment. A continued EDI focus, humanities, scholarships, study space. We're loving that student well-being is at the center, along with what a lot of students come to TMU for, experiential learning and the experience we give them there. Okay. Oh, okay. So our teams will be able to keep these word clouds, which is great as we continue through the budget process. We really appreciate your participation in this. I see there's over 54 people that have entered something, so that's great. Okay, so thank you for interacting. I will now turn it over to Kimberly McCausland, our Vice Provost University Planning, who will walk us through the rest of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Roberta. I'm going to start with information about the factors that affect our budget. And after that, I'll move on to what we're planning here for 25-26. Next slide, please. Thanks. First, this is a general overview of where we get our operating revenues from and what we spend them on. Most of our revenue, more than 90% of it, is tied directly to enrollment, tied to students. More than half, 55%, comes from tuition fees, which are largely regulated by the government's tuition fee framework. 36% comes from government grants that are tied to enrollment. On the expenditure side, the second pie chart there, more than 3/4 of our spending is on salaries and benefits, which is not surprising given that our core business is all about people who are doing teaching, doing research, providing student services, and so on. 17% of our spending is on non-salary expenses, things like equipment and supplies, computing hardware and software, all of the things we need to buy to make the institution run. 4% of our spending is on student financial aid. Next slide, please. I mentioned grants as a source of revenue on the previous slide. Government grants are limited to domestic students, and the number of domestic students for whom we receive grant funding is limited by the Ministry of Colleges and Universities. Our actual domestic enrollment is currently above those funded levels. We see very high levels of student demand for our programs. The plan for fall 2025 is to decrease our intake of new undergraduate students just slightly, which will still keep us above funded levels. The ministry has signaled that they plan to adjust funded enrollment levels in 2 years from now, but we don't know what that will look like, so there's some uncertainty there. Right now, however, we are not receiving funding for enrollment growth. Next slide, please. The international front continues to be challenging. 2 years ago, we were concerned about very long processing times or wait times for the approval of student visa applications. It meant there were some students who faced delays arriving in Canada as a result. At this time last year, those delays were still a problem. But on top of that, we heard the news that the number of international visa applications was going to be capped by the federal government. Those two factors, the long visa wait times plus the caps, are still with us. And we have more news now. Last year's cap included just undergraduate students from outside of Canada. Now, graduate students will be included in our cap, and so will students who are already in Canada, but who are transferring between institutions, including those who are moving from a high school to post-secondary. I should clarify as well that the cap is on the number of study permit applications that we can submit for students to come to TMU. So how many of those applications actually result in a student joining us depends on study permit approval rates and how long it takes the federal government to process those applications. Next slide, please. Here, thanks. Here you can see how TMU compares to other universities in Ontario in terms of the proportion of our students who are international. And you can see us there as the yellow bar, 5 up from the bottom. This is from last year when our international enrollment was a little over 10% of our total enrollment. And that was compared to a system average of about 20%. This year, about 9% of our enrollment is international. And really the takeaway here from this slide is that TMU has been relatively careful, relatively prudent about its overall level of international enrollment. Next slide, please. You'll recall that when we looked at revenues, more than half comes from tuition fees. For domestic students, which is most of our enrollment, we're subject to the tuition fee framework that is set by the Ministry of Colleges and Universities. In 2019, the ministry required institutions to reduce their tuition by 10% compared to the previous year's levels. What that meant is that our tuition rates were brought back to roughly 2015-16 levels. And that tuition rate has been frozen ever since, with no adjustments, even for inflation. So having rates that are equal to those about a decade ago has certainly put some pressure on institutions across the province, including ours. Next slide, please. Last June, the province did announce some new grants for universities and colleges. You may have heard in the news about $1 billion investment. And that amount, that investment, was divided across 3 years and across all colleges and universities in the province. So about 45 institutions divided by 3 years. TMU's share looks like this. There were 3 types of grants. The first was an across-the-board increase. TMU received $7.4 million this year in 24-25 for that across-the-board increase, which will be increased to $12.5 million next year in 25-26. The second allocation was a one-time top-up for institutions that demonstrated particularly high need. We received $17.3 million for that as a one-time grant. Together, these funds have helped us avoid a budget reduction this year in 24-25, but they're not enough to cover inflation going forward, particularly since the top-up is just one-time money. With respect to that top-up, for institutions in higher need, the institutions receiving those funds had to agree to undergo an efficiency and accountability review, which would be completed by an external third party. And I'll say a bit more about that on the next slide. For our third party, for our third party review, the external consultants are required to look at 5 broad areas. These are governance, administrative and student services, academic programming, physical assets and facilities, collaborative or shared procurement or purchasing opportunities, and revenue generation. The external review team has been meeting with offices and individuals across the university over the past few months to learn about our operations, and they're putting together their findings and recommendations with a view to submitting a final report before the end of this fiscal year. Next slide, please. Thanks. So that was an overview of some of the internal and external factors that are affecting us. And I'll now turn to what this means for us as a university in 25-26. Next slide. So far, I've reviewed a number of factors that affect our budget planning, and really the theme there is constraint, followed by uncertainty about whether and when any of that constraint may be lifted. And I've just summarized those factors here for us. Next slide, please. When we're discussing our budget planning, the scope of our discussion is the operating budget. That's the portion of the budget that's mostly within our control. So I'll distinguish that from a consolidated budget, which includes things like research grants that are tied to a special project, donor funds for a scholarship or a special building project that are not part of the operating budget. Our operating budget this year is approximately $690 million, and it does cover most of our activity. I've listed on this slide here some broad categories of activity that are covered by our operating budget. Next slide. When we're doing budget planning for the year ahead, we undertake various analyses to estimate both changes in our revenues and projected changes in expenses. On the revenue side, we expect an increase of 1.7% for the year ahead. What we call base or ongoing revenue increases ongoing revenues are expected to increase by 0.7% or just over $2 million. We will also have some one-time funds this coming year, which are left over from that one-time top up that I mentioned earlier. Our costs, on the other hand, are expected to increase by 25 million, mainly due to inflation, leaving a gap between new revenues and new expenses of $13 million. Next slide, please. Here you can see what our assumptions look like. The second column on this table includes estimates for 2025-26. The first column represents the approved budget for this current year, just for reference. You can see that our total revenues are projected to increase by a little over 2 million. Total projected expenses are up by almost 25 million, again, mainly due to inflation. That leaves us with a base or ongoing shortfall of 22.6 million. However, there was the $17.3 million top up that we received this year. This year, the Board of Governors approved us using some of that to balance our budget, and we expect to have 9.6 million of it remaining for next year. The specific use of that remainder is to be confirmed, but if for planning purposes we assume it's available at this time, we're left with the shortfall of 13 million. As a result, we're planning for a base budget reduction across the university of 2.5% this year. There have been a variety of reports, articles, and circulation in the media, in the news, about budget challenges being felt across the province. And we're not unique in that regard. While it will not be easy, we are confident in our ability to work together. Next slide, please. So we're going back to the Mentimeter tool now. Again, we will collect everyone's responses, so we will be able to see them afterwards. They are anonymous, however, so we don't know who is responding. And we would like to hear your input or your thoughts on suggestions that you have for this year's budget, given the constrained environment that we're facing. I'm reading these as they're coming in, and of course we'll spend a lot of time going through them afterwards as well, but these do touch on some of the areas that are part of the review, and then there's some more specific suggestions, so thank you. I'm seeing a few questions in here as well, and there will be an opportunity after this for questions too. I like the last one I see about lobbying for funding.
We do that on a daily basis.
Okay. Seems to be slowing down now, so I may move off it and move to some questions. But at the end, we will also, in addition to the questions, we will also give you a way to connect with us later as well.
Maybe, Kimberly, there's a question there before we receive more questions about the SMA4. I think it's good. You have, this is the strategic mandate agreement, round number 4. We are in the process of negotiating that with the government. And the question was about what to do with the part of the budget that is at risk. Kimberly, you can address this in terms of our targets.
Sure.
And how we met with our targets in terms of those risks. Please go ahead.
Sure, happy to. Thank you. So the question, if I remember it correctly, was what are you doing, or how do these targets work for SMA4? It's worth 25% of our operating grant. So yes, that's exactly correct. It's worth about $63 million this year. So as part of our strategic mandate agreement, that agreement serves 2 broad purposes. 1, it sets the level of domestic enrollment for which we are funded. And 2, it sets out a number of performance metrics with targets that each university is expected to reach. The targets are not identical university by university. They vary because they are set on the basis of our actual past performance. So the ministry has areas including things like student graduation rates, research funding, excuse me while I take a sip of water. Research funding, experiential learning, things that are tied to both government and institutional priorities. And they set targets for us to reach. Each target is assigned a weight, and the university is able to determine that weight within a range. So there are, going to SMA4, there are 8 targets, and we are able to weight them differentially between 5 and 25%, adding up to the $63 million. If there is a shortfall from the target, we are penalized only in relation to the shortfall from the target, which does really help spread the risk out. So the fact that these targets are set on the basis of past performance, and that we are able to weight the importance of each target in terms of its relationship to the overall pot, is quite helpful. The other thing that has happened is the targets are expressed as a range. So they're aware that, for example, a graduation rate may vary slightly from one year to the next. So the targets are expressed as a range, which is also helpful. We have not yet seen what our targets for SMA4 will be yet. We're at the end of our 3rd strategic mandate agreement. It finishes at the end of this fiscal year. And we've been in discussion with the ministry to develop the targets for the next SMA, but given the election period, things have been a little bit quiet there. So we assume that we'll hear more in the coming weeks as the ministry comes back on after the election. So those targets in SMA4 are expected to start in 25-26. So I see another question on the board now. Will TMU be cutting programs like other schools? May I turn that one over to Roberta?
Sure, thank you. Appreciate the question. And I know we've heard a lot about this in the news, and I can say no, we are not implementing program cuts. At TMU, we remain committed to offering a diverse range of academic programs, of course, as you all know, that reflect our values and that support student success. And we continue to assess our courses, our program offerings to ensure that they, of course, align with our student demand and institutional priorities. And really our focus, and this came through even in the academic plan, is on strategic enhancements and improvements rather than, these broad reductions that we're hearing about at other institutions. So really, in my view, we are really prioritizing thoughtful academic planning, working closely with faculty, with our deans, with our students and other stakeholders to really explore ways to sustain and evolve programs while maintaining high quality education that including experiential learning opportunities that folks mentioned in the first Mentimeter. Those experiences that really render high quality education that TMU is known for.
Okay, how can we pay for new buildings for the medical school, law school, and student wellness center if we are cutting our budget? I may turn this one over to Mohammed, if that's okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for the question, and I will just make sure that we understand. When we talk about budget, we have the operating budget to run the university, which is the one that we are planning for the next fiscal year. But also we have to allocate resources to our infrastructure, including new buildings like this. And in terms of allocation of resources, we consider different sources of funding for those capital projects, including donations. We are very active these days with our community here and also communities outside to get donations to cover that part that is important, which is to cover the expenses for capital projects. But also we have made cases to all levels of governments to help us with those capital projects. I mean, we are expecting, I hope, that after the election of tomorrow at the provincial level, if the situation of the economy is affected by the tariffs imposed by Trump, we are expecting that the government will put also in place some funding for infrastructure, and we have a number of ready projects that we can submit to get funding. We are also reaching out to the federal government to secure funding for those capital projects. But also we work with the municipalities, like in the case in Brampton, the building that is going to host the medical school, the entire building actually was donated by the city of Brampton, and we secured it's over 200 square foot of space. We secured also a piece of land next to the building, and in addition to that, the city of Brampton was able to give us a donation of $20 million to start the renovation of the building. Of course, we need to cover the gap, and that's exactly what we are trying to achieve with other levels of government, but also with potential donors. The question also here include the Student Wellness Center, which is an important piece that is going to be at the center of our campus. I think we have to recognize the leadership of our students who run a referendum, and we are collecting a levy coming directly from students. So almost third of the cost of this exercise is going to be covered by students. But we are reaching out to donors, and we have secured a number of donations, and we'll continue to work on that aspect. University also can use some of the reserves to cover some of it, but we are not touching operating funds to cover the expenses that we have for capital projects.
Okay, international student numbers have increased significantly at TMU in recent years, but there is no direct investment in support services. How is the institution going to support international student retention? I may turn that one over to Roberta to discuss the support services that we have now.
Sure. So this is a question that also came up during our academic plan, our international plan consultations. We hear a lot from our international students. We have invested quite a bit in support services for international students. We have an entire team, for example, dedicated. And we have orientation and transition support for them. We have immigration advising, financial assistance. I know that the Provost's office has contributed more money over the last year, and will continue this year on international scholarships for students, because we recognize how important that is. With respect to health and wellness, we also have extended health coverage, for example, in place, and there are through ISS, in International Student Services. We also have a lot of well-being resources. Of course, more can always be done. But I think that in speaking with some of the international students that I have the pleasure of dealing with as the provost, I think we really are trying to build a community. And if you read our international plan, there are strategies and metrics in there that talk about how to further support, even in a constrained environment, as best we can, as we prioritize what we want to do. So thank you.
I may add just a comment, Kimberly, to what Roberta has mentioned. If you look actually, when you compare universities in terms of support for students or student services, if you look actually to the Maclean's magazine ranking, TMU is always actually a top university in terms of the level of support to students. So, and we will continue to do that. Of course, the question is also about international students. That's another important aspect that we need to reinforce.
Okay, thank you, Roberta and Mohammed. Is there another question coming up? Will there be changes to student employment opportunities on campus? I can speak very briefly to that, and then I may turn it over to Mohammed and Roberta in case they'd like to add to it. In terms of student support expenditures, student financial aid, including work-study opportunities, for example, that are part of our student financial aid framework, those are not reduced when there are budget reductions. So the short answer is no, there are no plans to reduce those, but I may turn it over to Roberta or Mohammed in case they have further context.
Go ahead, Roberta.
Yeah, okay. So plus one to what Kimberly said. We also have, as many probably know, or maybe you don't know, we have a very important division in the Division of Students in our Vice Provost Students Office on career co-op and student success. where there are a lot of students can look for jobs. There's a lot of support around career advice. There's workshops for our students. There's sites on the same site. There's on-campus, off-campus jobs. So this is really important for us. And it is also part of our commitment to future readiness for our students. So I don't see reductions there or changes in that in this area. I don't know if Mohammed wanted to add anything.
No, I think that's it's enough.
With specific allocations like the 7.6 million from the Post-Secondary Education Sustainability Fund for one-time use, what specific programs or initiatives will these funds support? So when we showed the table earlier in the presentation that showed our projected increases in revenues and expenditures, we were using those funds to cover inflation. And in this current year, the 7.6 million that the person asking the question refers to in 24-25, the board approved us using that this year to balance our budget. So it's not that those funds were directed to a specific initiative. They were used to balance our budget. Mohammed or Roberta, anything from you on that?
Not from me. I think that's exactly what has been done.
Are you considering strategic cuts rather than across the board, which increases workload and decreases impact? So on the implementation of the across the board cuts, those are done at the level of faculties or divisions, which are very large units, and the leaders of those divisions will face the task, if you will, of deciding what is the best way to implement those across their portfolio. And then in addition to that, of course, we have recommendations that we'll be able to assess and consider that come from the third-party review that's currently being undertaken. So when it comes to reductions or changes that we might make, there's likely a combination of things that are across the board, and then perhaps more, I think the word here is strategic, but perhaps are aimed more at restructuring or rethinking particular components of our operation. Mohammed and Roberta may have more.
Yeah, that's the decision is always a local decision. And of course, we expect from all those big units to reduce their budget by 2.5%, but it's not necessarily uniformly distributed over all their subunits. It's up to the leader to discuss with their teams and make those reductions in the best interests of the unit itself.
Can the university advocate for more government funding? Yes, and I think I'll turn this one over to Mohammed.
Absolutely. We always advocate for more funding for our university. And I can tell you, we're already engaged with all political parties because we have an election that is coming tomorrow. And each major party has a platform in relation to post-secondary system. And we definitely are engaging with all of them about their views and their priorities for the system. And when programs are announced, we are always discussing with the government about making sure that we get our portion of the funding. And I would assure you that for the past few years, we have actually secured not the lion's share of the funding, but always we got actually more than funding that is for our size of university through different programs, but we are always knocking on those doors. And to answer the question, absolutely yes, that's part of what we do.
Can you speak to what is being done to ensure employee job security? Roberta, would this be one for you?
Sure, I can start, of course. So for this budget year, all units are basically reviewing their base budgets as part of our ongoing commitment to responsible financial planning, right? And so this is an early stage of assessment, focusing on identifying efficiencies and strategic opportunities that we see that we can that will help us also maintain our commitment to academic excellence and student success. So I think at TMU, and I think this year is no different, our priority is really to take a thoughtful and measured approach, ensuring that budget decisions align with, of course, our long-term goals and objectives at the university, of course, the needs of our community. So yes, divisions, units have been asked to reduce by right now to plan for a 2.5% reduction. And so it's still early to say where those cuts are going to be or those reductions. And we also have, we're hoping that perhaps to the last question about government, advocating to government for more money, we hope that will come through so that we can continue to have conversations with units around where the reductions will be. So I think I'll turn it over to Mohammed to add anything else, but right now we are in the early stages of budget, and we're trying our best.
Just to put you in the context of government funding, because as a post-secondary institution that is under government policies and regulations, you have seen in terms of our revenues, we depend a lot on government decisions and government policies, both on the grant side and then the tuition fees that we charge for students. What we presented today is the situation as of today, and we are planning to have a reduction of 2.5% for this next fiscal year. However, we have not seen the budget that the government will have for us, depending on the on which government will or which party will form the next government. If you look at the platforms for different major parties, I think if you look at the Liberal one and the NDP one, both are actually thinking about increasing grants by 20% because they know that the situation is extremely difficult. And I'm sure you are hearing every day in the media about significant budget cuts, big deficits. A number of universities and colleges are going to run huge deficits. And some of them are in excess of $100 million per year. And also many institutions, especially colleges, but some universities are also closing programs. And you have seen in the media without referring to any of them here. So the government of tomorrow will definitely have a budget, and they know the situation of colleges and universities. And I'm hoping that based on what we know about the platforms, the PC party is talking about investing $450 million. I'm talking about their platforms 450 million over 3 years for growth in some specific areas. Our role is to make sure that we position TMU in a good position to get more funding, regardless who is the party that will form the government.
Thanks, Mohammed. Is the university considering alternative revenue sources? I guess this goes back to that slide where we identified most of our revenues as coming from tuition and government grants that were tied to domestic enrollment. So what are some alternative revenue sources we may consider? Mohammed or Roberta, do you have any thoughts on that?
I can start and Roberta can add to it. In terms of when we talk about revenue sources for universities, I think we have two categories: operating funds and the rest. And most of the rest is, of course, supporting students with scholarship and awards, supporting our expansion or growth in terms of capital projects. And on those categories, as I mentioned, we work with our advancement team to secure maximum number or maximum funding to support those initiatives. However, when you reach out to donors, I don't know any donor that will give money to the university for operating funds. That's not an option. So in terms of operating funds, the two mechanisms, either to convince the government to increase funding to our operating budget, or to look at other opportunities. And for us, and you will probably see it in the exercise that we are doing a review now with Deloitte, we have our Chang School of Continuing Education with possibilities to generate more funds through programs like micro-credentials and others. And we are considering all those options. Absolutely, we need, this is a difficult moment for universities and colleges, and we need to think out of the box about alternatives for revenue generation.
Thanks, Mohammed. Another question about programs. Will TMU cut programs that aren't good at getting students into jobs? So there's some assumptions in that question, but so I think I'm going to turn that one over to Roberta to dissect a little bit.
Thank you, Kimberly. So I think I already addressed this in a very general way. And so I think we've already answered it. We've said we are not cutting programs. And I'm not quite sure what that aren't good at getting students into jobs. I can say that TMU ranked top 10 in Canada recently for graduate employability. So I'll leave it there. I'm sure some of you have seen our social media on that. So I think we do a pretty good job of our students getting jobs after graduation.
And I would add to that the importance of one of the questions that was asked today is about the SMA, or the Strategic Mandate Agreement. And we have, of course, a number of factors in the SMA. And one of them actually is to look at the percentage of students who are getting jobs after 6 months and after 2 years. So that's part actually of our accountability to the government. And the other thing, most of our programs are 70% of our students are in professional programs, and 95% of our students have opportunities for experiential learning. I think those are the advantages that we have at TMU for our students to get jobs in their fields after graduating from here.
This is an important one. Well, they're all important, but given the current climate around EDI, how will TMU ensure that it continues to deliver on its commitments? Mohammed, would you take that one?
Yes. I mean, this is an excellent question, an important question, but also we have an important commitment to our community vis-a-vis EDI. Unfortunately, the climate around us, especially south to the border, EDI is seen now as something very bad. And a lot of people think that by promoting EDI, we're promoting less quality of education, which is completely wrong. We are actually, of course, we have a commitment to continue this work that we started many, many years about our commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we need to explain why this is important, because if we just leave it to politicians that unfortunately are talking about it in a very negative way, unfortunately, the general public will be influenced by that. I think we need to explain this. We have had many situations this year when we started the admission process to the medical school. We have a commitment to accept students that are reflective of society. We have a commitment to accept students that are coming from different communities, but also from different regions. And our response to that is actually, and you will see probably the first cohort of students in the medical school will be able to deliver the first cohort with great diversity, but also with excellence in terms of their academic journey. And I think the response is always to link EDI to excellence, because we are not just pushing for more diversity without paying attention to good quality. And I think quality and commitment to EDI go hand in hand.
Thank you, Mohammed. I know we're getting near the end. We have 2 minutes left. So I think we can fit this in, and we can show you a slide after this with some contact information and a place that you can ask other questions, because we do still want to hear from people. Are incentives being provided to faculties that are willing to share resources, such as shared TFA positions, shared facilities, etc.? Faculty resources seem siloed. Roberta?
Okay, thank you, Kimberly. So this is a really interesting question, and really, I'm really happy that someone posed it, because it's also something a lot of us have been thinking about with respect to, for example, strategic cluster hires, right? And what those could look like. So whether it's by discipline or field, or whether it's by faculty, right? Where you can hire a group of faculty that 3 or 4, let's say, that are part of a particular discipline that could be shared across faculties. It also builds a sense of community. You could do it, you can pick certain topics that we would agree on collegially. That's one. Shared facilities, of course, we've been talking about that a lot. I noticed there was a question also about student services, centralizing student services, someone had asked. So I think that we could do a better job of getting rid of the silos. And of course, that would require a lot of conversations with different stakeholders at TMU, at the university. So thank you for that question. And I think sharing resources has also been over the last year a sector conversation as well, because universities find themselves kind of in, same boat, right? And so this is really important, and it would be good to explore this further. Thank you.
Thanks, Roberta. So we're at 7:01 now. We just want to highlight some next steps. We will have 2 more sessions like this. They're in person, though, in the middle of March, on March 17th and 18th. And the locations and times of those have been communicated in Toronto Met today, but we'll send out other communications as well closer to the time as a reminder. We're also going to continue consultations with specific groups, such as some of the collective bargaining groups, some student groups. We'll, of course, be meeting with leaders of faculties and divisions across the university, and we'll update Senate on the budget as well. There's a website there where you can get more information about the budget. And if you have questions or suggestions, please email budget@torontomu.ca. We will monitor that inbox, and we'll get back to you if you've got questions for us. Thanks very much for joining us this evening, and we'll see you again at a future town hall, or we'll look forward to your emails. Thank you very much for your interest and for your engagement tonight.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.